welcome to everybody. I hope you can see we are here for the Americans to celebrate the 31 years of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And we're going to get started shortly. So if you're attending, just please be patient with us. We've started just a little bit early. And we just wanted to give everybody the chance to log in, to make sure they can see everything they want to see. And we need a couple of minutes to get our Facebook Live going. And please note, I know it said so when you all logged in, but we are recording this and we will make it available on our YouTube channel. And we do also have some questions planned, but if you have questions for our guests, please do put them in the Q&A box and we will read them and address them as soon as we have time for them. So, just wanted to let everybody know. And if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see that there is a transcript, a live transcript going on. If you see an error, you'll please excuse us because we are using mechanical translations. So it should be accurate.
Karen, on my computer, you have to press transcription. You have to press a little button to get it to start. To start.
Ah, okay, that's really good to know.
I could tell you what it says in French, but I don't.
Tell us what it says in French, and we'll translate it.
It says transcription en direct.
Okay. So I believe this means live transcription in English. So if you have a live transcription button on your screen, go ahead and press it. So you will be able to see what's going on here. And yes, Susan wrote that the chat function in her computer is not working, but we are using the Q&A, so please do feel free to go in and chat there. And so Marnie, you are, I'm going to pin you so that everyone can see you. There you are. And it is now 3 o'clock. Do we want to wait a couple minutes and give some more people a chance to log in? I know that people are logging in right now.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. I have a question, Karen. With the presentation,
yes.
Are you going to share your screen or should I share mine?
Actually, it's probably better if you share yours.
Okay. Let me just start doing that. So, and it's best to do it from the PowerPoint rather than the Google slides, right?
Yes, it's definitely better to do it from PowerPoint because with Google Slides, everybody sees the notes and not necessarily the actual slides.
Okay.
So while we're waiting and while Lisette is getting set up, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Karen Frankenstein. I am the International Caucus Coordinator, and we're really excited at DA that the Disabilities Caucus is in formation, and we've got people from all over the world. And I am based in Germany. Marnie, you're based in France.
In France. Yeah.
Max, where are you based?
Canada.
Max, you're in Canada, right? Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
it didn't come across acoustically.
No problem.
All right. Lisette is also in Canada.
Yes. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Lisette. Great to see you.
So I have a
Angela.
comment.
Oh, yeah.
You have to, in order for me to share my screen, I guess you have to stop sharing yours.
Oh, that's good to know. I will stop.
Thank you. Great.
And let me just set up.
Thanks.
Okay.
Shows. So I guess I should do F5.
All right. And I'm going to go ahead and start our Facebook broadcast now.
Great. Thank you.
If anybody else wants to tell us where they're from, they can always put that. Always interesting to see where people are calling or watching from. So if you want to put that in the Q&A as well, that would be fun.
So is the view okay for everyone? Are you able to see the slides?
We see your whole PowerPoint. Can you go
Okay.
into slide presentation mode?
Yes, that's what I was trying to do. Is that it? Perfect. I wouldn't want it to, I want to have control of it. So I don't want it to be automatic. I guess that's fine here.
That's perfect.
Yeah, perfect. All right.
Okay.
Is it visible?
Yes. All right, so we are now live on Facebook, and I'd like to introduce Candace Carriston, who is our International Chair of DA.
Hi, thank you, Karen, and welcome everyone to today's event. As Karen mentioned, my name is Candace Carriston, and I am the International Chair of Democrats Abroad, or DA, and joining you today from Munich, Germany. For those of you who might not be as familiar with us, DA is the official arm of the Democratic Party for the estimated 9 million Americans living outside of the United States. And if you aren't yet a member, I encourage you to join today, and there should be a link in the chat shortly so that you can do just this. Our main goal as an organization is to help Americans abroad vote and to remain informed about and engaged in the US political process. And on this note, I really am thrilled to be here with all of you today on the 31st anniversary of the passing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, the landmark hard-won legislation that leaned on the gains forged by the 1964 Civil Rights Act. No longer out of sight, out of mind, the rights of Americans with disabilities were finally acknowledged and protected. But nearly as soon as the ADA was passed in 1990, attempts, primarily from Republican lawmakers, have been ongoing to whittle down the rights that this bill promised. Every time Congress has passed a law protecting the rights for Americans with disabilities, opponents have gone to court time and time again to weaken the law and create new loopholes. Right now, matters of urgency for us all are: one, passing S1, the For the People Act of 2021, to protect and expand our voting rights, protecting Roe versus Wade to move towards greater reproductive justice, and the reason we're all here today, protecting the ADA, and with that, the human rights of Americans with disabilities. I'm gratified that members of Democrats Abroad from across all three of our regions, Asia Pacific, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, or EMEA, and the Americas, are in the process of forming a Global Disabilities Caucus. Some are in the disability community, others are allies, but all are committed to educating our members about the issues impacting individuals with disabilities, to advocating on proposed legislation addressing disability rights, and to ensuring that our own activities, events, and venues are fully accessible. On behalf of the emerging Global Disability Caucus, as well as the co-sponsoring Global Asian American and Pacific Islander, Black, Hispanic, LGBTQ+, Progressive, Youth, Women, and Veterans and Military Families Caucuses, I welcome you to Democrats Abroad's first event commemorating the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act 31 years ago today. Here to tell us more about the full program is the Global Disability Caucus-Formation Committee Chair, Marnie Delaney. Marnie?
Thank you, Candace. We're so pleased to have everyone here and to have you join us on such a special day. Just a little background. In most Indigenous cultures, there was no word for disability. Uniqueness was celebrated, and the way to a full and fulfilled life was achieved by achieving balance between body, mind, and spirit, embracing difference as part of that equation. To facilitate that, individuals were given responsibilities which reflected the way they could best contribute to the good of the group, be it hunting or carrying water. In other cultures today, like ours, society does not adapt for us. We are forced to adapt to society, to accept imbalance. The history of people with disabilities in the United States is consistent with other groups of people who have been marginalized rather than celebrated for being different, for not being like or part of the crowd that's in power. If you watch the amazing documentary CRIP CAMP, you'll meet some of the individuals who refuse to accept an imbalanced future. Individuals often pushed to the edges, who put themselves smack in the middle of things and demanded the same rights and opportunities as those held by the people in power. You'll see them ignore expectations, defy limitations, and find the necessary strength to force change by working together, supporting each other, and staying focused on one fundamental shared goal, one simple demand: equal rights and opportunities. As always, the simple idea wasn't simple to achieve, as you'll see in the film, and as always, selfishness repeatedly trumped public good. As always, one step forward was frequently followed by a step back, sometimes two. And so the battle continues today, as Candace mentioned. Rights and protections won by the community of people with disabilities are not guaranteed and face regular assault from multiple quarters. They have since the day they were won. We know taking action with others makes us more creative, more able to meet challenges, and more interested in sharing and treading gently on the earth on which more than 1 billion people with disabilities face daily, the obstacles we have too often allowed to litter their paths. With this gathering, we begin a conversation on how to ensure that people with disabilities are an important part of the diversity we seek within Democrats abroad and without, that we all know and celebrate our history, that we continue to move forward, never backward, and that every unique person faced with a disability is also met with equal respect, equal rights and opportunities, with equal hope and promise for their future as an American. We are grateful to all the DA caucuses who have joined together to sponsor this event, and Candace for her ready, strong support. We are truly appreciative of you, our guests today, and for our speakers who are willing to take center stage and help us understand why the fight must continue. One quick reminder, we'll be gathering your questions for our guests in the chat box, both on Zoom and on the Facebook live stream. So please add them as we go along. We have questions planned and we'll add yours as time permits. So now Elizabeth Blackburn, Chair of DA China, will introduce our guests. It's all yours, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Marnie. And to everyone joining the celebration, good evening from China. It is a true honor to be speaking tonight with such a storied group of organizers and activists. And our first panelist tonight is Summer Matthews. Summer Matthews is a former special education teacher and a current doctoral student in special education. She attends the University of North Carolina as a LEAPS doctoral grant recipient. A teacher for 5 years in 3 different schools, she has been aware of discrimination faced by students with disabilities and she made the decision to return to school in order to implement the most change possible at a systemic level. She is interested in full inclusion for all people with disabilities and sexuality and sexual education for all people with disabilities. Summer has lived in Japan and Hawaii for 2 years each. Welcome, Summer.
Hi, everybody. So I know we talked a little bit about CRIP CAMP earlier, and one of the things that I particularly love about CRIP CAMP and cannot rave about enough, you absolutely should watch it if you haven't, and if you have, watch it again, is how it centers sexuality of people in the conversation about disabilities. Because something that is often overlooked is the fact that people with disabilities and people with even significant disabilities are fully human beings with fully human urges. And so today I am going to talk to you about sex. So I'm gonna open it up with a quote by Barbara Waxman. And Barbara Waxman was a sexual health educator and a disability self-advocate. So this quote says, no group in this country, and it's talking about the US at this point, faces the sort of sexual and reproductive restrictions disabled people do. We are frequently prevented from marrying, bearing and or rearing children, learning about sexuality, having sexual relationships, and having access to sexual literature. And so I want you to just take a minute and I want you to sit with that and think about what it means for an entire group of people, and in fact, the largest marginalized group of people, to be left behind and denied those basic rights. As you probably already know, for reasons such as underreporting, being able or being unable to articulate experiences, and as mentioned in the quote, inadequate lack of sexual education, people with intellectual disabilities particularly are among the most at risk for sexual assault. This risk is up to 7 times higher for them than their non-disabled peers. So despite this, they are often denied access to sexual education, and they are denied something that is recognized by the World Health Organization as a central part of being human, which is their right to sexuality. So something that I did while I was looking into this topic is I conducted a literature review to see what was out there as far as sexual education for individuals with more significant disabilities. And what I found, one theme that came up in this literature search was that individuals with intellectual disabilities reported that the sexual education that they received was completely inadequate. So for example, in one focus group, when these people were asked if they felt their schools did a good job at sexual education, the overwhelming response from the participants was no way, and then they all left. So that gives you an idea about how they felt their sexual education was in school. And then further, when I was looking for research-based sexual education and sexuality programs, I only found 4 in the past 11 years. So a lot of what's being used out there is decades old, and that's something that needs to be changed as well. Now, in regards to sexuality, which is something that I find very important, people with intellectual disabilities and other more significant disabilities are historically thought to be asexual, not interested in sex whatsoever. There's a historical basis for this. It dates back to exploitation sideshow acts, and it featured people prominently with disabilities and called them like eternal man children, dressed them in outfits that were very childish to kind of push that asexuality identity on them. But the truth is that even now, many parents and caregivers, they want to keep it this way. One study cited a mother who, when her 11-year-old son with intellectual disabilities started exploring his body and became interested in masturbation, like any 11-year-old might, she placed mitts on his hands and fastened his diaper so tight that he was not able to even adjust it. There are also heaps of cases of parents suggesting genital mutilation or breast surgery or forced hysterectomies, and that still goes on to this day. So in another example by Michael Gill in his book about his experience as a workshop, as someone in the field of disabilities helping in sheltered workshop environments, 2 women in a sheltered workshop environment and shared home. So they worked together, they lived together, they were happy. They were seen hugging and kissing, and they were assumed to have developed a lesbian relationship. These are adults. These are adult women that were assumed to have developed a lesbian relationship. And instead of talking to the women about it at all, they were separated at work and they were separated at home. They were moved away from each other to prevent any sort of relationship from continuing. This was done without their consent or knowledge. So really what's happening and what is continuing to happen is just not okay. We cannot continue to let people with disabilities and extensive support needs and any disability, whether significant or not, continue to be routinely denied sexual education and denied their basic human right to sexuality. The ADA did a lot, and it opened up so many doors for people, but it didn't do everything. And we need to make sure, we need to develop comprehensive sexual education programs that are designed not only to give raw facts about menstruation and the birds and the bees, but we need to help them with friendships, with relationships, with understanding consent, and many other aspects that are just overlooked for this population. So it might be uncomfortable for you as a parent or a caregiver or a teacher to have these sorts of conversations, but not doing so is doing these people a lifelong disservice. So if I'm going to leave you with anything, I hope that you will leave with a sense of a new or renewed sense of obligation to this community, and to understand that these people are sexual beings just like anyone else, and that it is okay to talk to them, and it is imperative to talk to them about sex. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Summer. Let's talk about sex. Now I'd like to introduce Mike Nitz. Mike is the newly elected Vice Chair of DA Vietnam and an active member of the DA Veterans and Military Families Caucus. He joined the Navy in 2011 as a shipboard nuclear power plant technician. In 2013, he was admitted to the United States Naval Academy, where he studied comparative politics, Arabic, and the history of US-Iranian diplomatic relations. In 2015, he left the Naval Academy to return to active enlisted service in the field of underwater minefield detection and neutralization, which is not to be confused with explosive ordnance disposal, and served on board a minesweeper in Sasebo, Japan from 2016 to 2018. Thank you for your service, Mike. His health deteriorated while stationed in Japan, however, and he was ultimately medically retired from active service in January of 2020. He now spends most of his time advocating for improvements to systems that serve service members and veterans, advocating for disability rights and changes to the civilian disability system. He studies trends in election data throughout the United States. Mike, the floor is yours.
Hey everyone, my name is Mike, and like she said, I live in Vietnam. I live in Ho Chi Minh City. It's in the southern part of the country. And like she said, I am a Navy veteran. I served for just over 8 years. I joined when I was 21 years old, and I was medically retired about a year and a half ago. I grew up in, well, a village. in Kansas, a little tiny place named Reserve with about 80 people in it. And then I moved to North Carolina. So I vote out of rural Western North Carolina. Around when I was 19 or 20, I had my first real experience with the disabled community when I helped my aunt for a summer run a foster home for teenagers with pretty severe intellectual and emotional disabilities. And it was, an extremely difficult situation for everyone involved because, teenagers who have these kinds of disabilities often end up in the foster care system, and they end up getting bounced from home to home to home to home. We had one young girl who had not been in a stable home environment since she was around 6 years old, and she was 18. So, it's another really important topic I think that needs to be talked about is, children, teenagers, children who have to be removed from their homes, childhood post-traumatic stress disorder, and issues like that, who then, go through the foster care system and come out when they're 18. They're just like, all right, have fun, be a citizen, do your thing. Outside of that, about me, I'm a 100% disabled veteran, rated by the VA. My primary disabilities, if you will, are all mental and emotional, though I have a smattering of physical issues as well. That's all stem from my time in the service. And it's definitely been an interesting road. A lot of the medicine and best practices that we've learned surrounding mental and emotional disabilities is very young. And I think I'm a primary example of that. It took somewhere in the vicinity of 2 years to get a proper diagnosis and to finally get on a treatment plan that would work for me. And ultimately at my lowest point during that course of that 2 years, what really pushed the Navy to get me help was a suicide attempt. And so, this is an extremely important topic. And, when it started, they thought that I just had a problem with alcohol. As it progressed, they said, oh, you have, major depressive disorder. Here, we'll get you on SSRIs. You start taking Zoloft, start taking Wellbutrin, start taking these other medications. And, they made it worse, significantly worse for me. And at the time, I was stationed on a minesweeper. Minesweepers are the second smallest ship in the Navy. They have a crew of 86 people on a 224-foot-long wooden boat. They intentionally undercrew these ships so that if they hit a mine in a minefield and it goes up, they only lose a few people. So we were regularly working between 100 and 120 hours a week during this time. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's real. It's very true. And my only available psychiatrist, this was a very small base out in the middle of nowhere in Japan, near Nagasaki. We had a single mental health professional, but that position was gapped for 6 months. So we didn't actually have a mental health professional on base. The only mental health professional we had was on a large amphibious warship, the USS Bonhomme Richard, which, for those of you who follow military news, was recently decommissioned after a pretty significant fire. And so my psychiatrist on board the Bonhomme Richard would regularly deploy and be gone for months at a time. And so I would go for months at a time, working 120 hours a week with no care, none. And it took over a year for them to finally decide that maybe that wasn't the best place for me. And note that this was a year after I made an attempt on my own life while I was standing armed watch one night. And they sent me to San Diego. And within a few months, I had a proper diagnosis. And it was, it was so strange how much that diagnosis changed my life. They went from saying, you're just sad, it'll get better, to realizing my full diagnosis, which was severe bipolar 2 disorder with obsessive compulsive tendencies and general anxiety disorder and ADHD. And then this specific kind of mixture of things, they all kind of build on each other and get really bad without treatment. I swapped over to new medication. I swapped over to an entirely new treatment plan, and suddenly, things were changing. Things were a little bit different. In now that I'm out of the military, I've been retired. I have this diagnosis. I'm, still coming to terms with that years later, and I think that one of the biggest things that Democrats Abroad has done for me is it's given me a place where I can finally embrace my disability and stop feeling ashamed. Stop feeling ashamed that I'm drawing disability income from the VA. Stop feeling like because I didn't serve in Iraq or Afghanistan that I am less than somehow than other disabled veterans. That DA has given someone like me the opportunity to serve in leadership capacity, all over the place. Some people might say that they see my hand in a lot of pies, if you will, and that has been incredibly empowering and encouraging for me. And now to talk about a dream that I had while I was in the service of having the opportunity one day to maybe serve in a state legislature or in Congress or, something cool like that. Seeing people encourage that as opposed to discourage it, and that being open about disability is not hurtful. It's not something that makes you look bad. It's authentic and it's empowering, not only for me, but for the disability community as a whole, and especially for disabled veterans. So yeah, that's all I really had to say. I appreciate everyone, listening, and I look forward to hearing everyone else speak, and I look forward to answering questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Mental health is often ignored by ourselves and others. You've opened our minds. Oh, I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You're fine.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mike. You've opened our minds to the discussion of how we ignore our own mental health and how difficult it is. We greatly appreciate your sharing your incredible journey to be here today. We're so glad that you're here as an advocate. Next, we will be hearing from Max McLeod.
Oh, okay, my turn. Okay, just give me a sec, sorry. Okay, perfect. I'm Max McLeod. I'm from Edmonton, and when you hear of Edmonton, I want every single one of you to think of two things. The first is that we currently have two of the best hockey players in the world, and the second is that Edmonton was the birthplace of the idea for a disability caucus with Democrats Abroad. More on that shortly. So a little bit about me is that I am a travel consultant for Expedia Cruises, who specializes in travel for those with disabilities. I came to the idea of specializing in travel for those with disabilities while taking a part of Royal Caribbean's training and seeing there is a cruise line for those who are on the autism spectrum like myself. Then the idea began to click. How can I make sure that more things become more inclusive, like how Royal Caribbean is with autism. In order to network properly, the key is to volunteer for something that you're quite passionate about. Besides tourism, politics is in my DNA, as my grand uncle was a very high profile politician in the United Kingdom for the Conservative Party in the 1950s through 1970. As much as I love my job as a child consultant, it is more of a part-time more of a part-time position. Politics is something that I would love a career in. That's why I decided to run for the vice chairman position of the Edmonton chapter, and I won by a single vote. I am hoping that my position as vice chair will help me grow the confidence I need. I'm someone who believes that leaders are not born, they're made, unless you are Prince Charles, William, and George, the heirs to the Canadian throne. One thing I struggle throughout my life is working in groups. Group work is a skill that I need to improve the most, because you will be working in pairs or a team, no matter what kind of career you're in, especially when it comes to politics and Democrats abroad. With Democrats Abroad, I browsed through the caucuses on the DA website. There was representation for minority racial groups such as African Americans, Asian American Pacific Islanders, and Hispanics. Our LGBT family and friends, as well as Democrats under the age of 35, have a caucus as well. That's great that I can be a part of the youth caucus, since I'm only 24 years of age. However, where's my caucus that represents me having a disability? Isn't the Democrat Party and Democrats Abroad supposed to represent Americans from all walks of life? That's why I'm here, to make sure that Democrats stick to our word about being an all-inclusive party that embraces diversity and everyone. I first met Denise, Ken, and Lizette at a candidate forum for DA Canada. This was my first opportunity to ask if anyone would be interested in helping me start up a disability caucus for Democrats Abroad. Luckily, all three of them felt the need to join me in making this caucus a reality. I've been a member of DA for almost 5 years now, but it wasn't until March of this year I decided to come out of my comfort zone and get more involved. If you want to get involved, please join our caucus. I promise I do not bite. You can also get involved by emailing your 2 senators and congressman or woman to join the Autism Caucus. You can also ask them to join the Americans Abroad Caucus as well. I've emailed my congressman from New York, 17th Congressional District, Mondaire Jones, and he actually responded to the Americans Abroad caucus request, and he will be joining that. And I still haven't heard from him on the Autism Caucus. I'm sure he's a busy guy, you would think, but I'll follow up on that a little bit later. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. It was great to be here and overcoming tremendous anxiety and lack of sleep to be all with you this morning, evening, afternoon, or wherever you are. Thank you.
Max, your story is incredible. As you mentioned, Max is a New Yorker and diagnosed with autism when he was 18. If you would like further help, feel free to directly contact myself and others on this call. I'm sure we'd all be happy to help. Max is the current vice chairman of the Edmonton chapter. And I think that making sure all Americans with Disabilities have a platform. Well, thank you so much for speaking about that. We will make sure that the Democratic platform lives up to its diversity platform, as you suggested tonight. Now I would like to direct our attention to our next panelist and her daughter. Denise Roig has been an active member of Democrats Abroad for nearly 3 years. She is a published writer of fiction and nonfiction, votes in California, and lives in Hamilton, which is in Ontario, Canada. She's been a DPCA rep, headed up last year's GOTV postcard campaign for COM's team. Denise and her husband adopted their daughter, Georgia, from the Republic of Georgia 25 years ago. Diagnosed at 1.5 years with cerebral palsy, Georgia's journey has been filled with great strides, thanks to wonderful therapists and educators, and of course, her share of challenges. Georgia has earned 3 college diplomas, all in helping professions. And just this week, she decided she really needed a university diploma to do the kind of work that she'd really like to do, which is to influence policy for people with disabilities. And going to DA's global meeting in DC 2 years ago fired her passion for politics. Employment, however, seems to be the next big hurdle. School is one thing, getting hired as a person with a disability is another. As an ally and an advocate, Denise sees this as the last frontier in acknowledged discrimination. Georgia, a great supporter of DA, even though she's not a US citizen, will be joining us too. So Denise, the floor is yours. Thank you.
So much, Elizabeth. Yes, I remember thinking when Max asked if there was a place for a disability caucus in Democrats Abroad this past spring during a Meet the Candidates session for DA Canada's upcoming election. And I thought, yes, of course there is. Yes, because to me, as Elizabeth just mentioned, disability is one of the last acknowledged areas of discrimination. And yes, because as the parent of a daughter with a disability, I have some idea of the barriers, physical, emotional, and definitely societal, that people with disabilities continue to face. And yes, because as John Lewis said, we just heard early last week, if not us, then who? When my husband and I adopted Georgia from the Republic of Georgia, a post-Soviet country in pieces after a civil war, we didn't realize what kind of challenges we would face as a family. We just forged ahead with our baby girl, puzzled increasingly by the missed markers that drive parents crazy about that supposedly track a child's development. Okay, we thought at 6 months, she's not sitting up yet. We'll see a physiotherapist. Okay, we thought at 1 year when she was still struggling to do other things like, I don't know, eating with a fork. We'll see an occupational therapist. It was a relief in a way when she was diagnosed at 1.5 years with cerebral palsy, with a form of it. And then at 3.5 with sensory neural hearing loss. The mystery and the quest for more information was finally over, but it was the beginning of our education as advocates and allies. And probably, if I'm honest, parents who were sometimes a thorn in the side of school administrators, insurance companies, and social support programs. I think we beat the drum pretty hard at times. What have the past 25 years been like? I think I should probably ask Georgia that question.
I'm not going to talk too much because I'm losing my voice, unfortunately.
She's been playing with our grandkids for 2 days straight. Lost it. But anyway, interesting and never dull, would you say?
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
In many ways, they've been like most families' lives, packed with just amazing, wonderful moments and triumphs, and then times that just really sucked. I remember reading something in those early years, because I was reading a lot about, families with disabilities, that life with a child with a disability is just more intense. And I like that word. That kind of says it. There's no self-pity in it. It's just more intense. Honesty like that helped explain the way our lives sometimes felt. But what really, really helped, and I've been struck by how often this word is used and what I've been reading about the foundations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, was and continues to be community. First, the group of incredible therapists Georgia was blessed with as a baby and a toddler, physios, OTs, speech therapists, who I saw as my therapists as well. Your very first OT and your very first physio said when Georgia was, I don't know, a year, 2 years, maybe, she said, that girl's going to surprise us. And that just helped so much. I can't tell you. Then later that circle enlarged to include the families we met through Georgia's special school in Montreal. It didn't matter that my child had CP and their children had Downs or a global developmental delay. We got each other. There was lots of laughter, sometimes quite dark, and unspoken understanding. And later still, there was horseback riding, downhill skiing, and sledge hockey. Sports for people with disabilities is a gift to the world, in my opinion, as much as it is for those who fearlessly get on a horse, climb on a sledge, or toss a basketball from a wheelchair. As you probably know, hockey is, I was going to say, is like a religion. No, it is a religion here in Canada. So is sledge hockey in the disability community. I'll never forget the first time I walked into a sledge hockey tournament in Mississauga, Ontario, where Georgia was competing with the Hamilton Sledgehammers. Walkers and wheelchairs were abandoned for the fastest moving sleds I have ever seen, and powered by determination, skill, and cutthroat competition. Stand-up hockey, who needs it? That's what they call it in the sledge hockey community. It's stand-up hockey, not just hockey. This was fierce and fast and totally normal. Having a disability was normal. I had to keep from crying most of that first weekend, I have to admit.
And it didn't matter that anyone had a disability. We were all pretty much even.
Absolutely. It was, yeah, it was time to cry and time to laugh and time to be just stunned by the amount of skill that the sport required. So community has saved us, as it has many families with a member who is disabled. But does that make life always fair? Hardly. We've experienced our share of ugly little surprises, such as when both the Canadian high school and the American high school in Abu Dhabi, where we lived for 3 years, refused to admit Georgia as a student. They just didn't know what to do with her. They just said, we can't. It was really clear and really cold. It took a British curriculum school staffed primarily with teachers from the subcontinent, most of whom had absolutely no background in special education, to say, well, let's give this a try.
And it worked very well.
It was. They considered it a great success after 3 years of her going to school there. No experience, but huge, willing hearts. And that's really what it takes. More recently, as a new hire with our local school board to work as an educational assistant with students with disabilities, George has been put through one hoop after another regarding accommodations that she actually never asked for. It's been a painful reminder that education is one arena and employment is another. But this part of Georgia's story is still being written with the recent decision to go back to university, not college this time for a degree in disability studies. You have always wanted to give back what you were given so generously by so many people for 2 decades and a half. I hope most of you have the opportunity to watch the moving documentary of CRIP CAMP. In notes, there are notes from the directors, Jim Lebrecht and Nicole Newnham. They wrote to accompany the film. They ask audiences to, quote, pay heed to the central theme in the film, the importance of lifting voices, which is what we're doing today, that don't often get heard, and building community, that word again. And this is what we're hoping to build within Democrats Abroad with the Global Disability Caucus, a community, a diverse community of people like all of us here. We need not just amplify our voices abroad, but to join them, to align them with the efforts of activists back in the US who continue to fight like crazy to defend the hard-won rights and protections. You know, there are these two bills again. The bills have always been there. They've always, since the day that the ADA became law, they've been, you know, Republicans especially have been chiseling them back into some kind of, they'd like them to disappear, I think. The kids in CRIP camp, the ones who went to camp, Gen Ed, back in the 1970s, who went to Washington and marched and argued and became the engine behind the ADA, we have to be those activists now. Thanks so much to all of you. I've learned so much listening to all of you, and thank you for listening.
Thank you both for sharing this evening. Georgia, we hope your voice comes back soon because yours is a voice that deserves to be heard. Heather Stone will be speaking next. Heather Stone is a member of DA Israel. She became a licensed attorney in New Jersey in 1988 and practiced municipal bond law in New Jersey from 1988 to 1990. She then moved to Israel for academic work in urban planning, passed the Israeli bar in 1993, and practiced law with a few of the largest law firms in Israel in the high-tech sector, doing investments, international mergers and acquisitions, and internal investigations of publicly traded companies for over 20 years. In 2017, she became visually impaired following brain surgery. She volunteers for Democrats Abroad, currently as Deputy International Counsel at the global level. She serves on the boards of a few nonprofit organizations in Israel and was the past chair of Democrats Abroad Israel. Heather is a mom of 2 grown teens and 2 dogs, including 1 guide dog and 1 emotional support dog. She continues to learn to navigate the world differently. Welcome, Heather.
Hi, everybody. So thanks, everybody, for coming today. And thanks to the team for putting this great event together. Really, really, really happy to be part of this event and the opportunity to share our experiences and to talk about how diverse disabilities are and to hear about the diverse disabilities of the people who are already participating in Democrats Abroad and who have come together to help form this caucus. I also am somewhat new to the disability community. As mentioned in the introduction, I underwent brain surgery in 2017. And before that, I had only a legal exposure to what is disability and disability law. I was the head of our pro bono program in the law firm. And the pro bono activity in the law firm was supporting the Bar Ilan Clinic in Law Persons with Disability program. And we would take cases for persons with disabilities in Israel and help support those people in their cases with matters having to do with education or housing or jobs or public accommodations, transportation, all kinds of issues under the Israeli Equal Rights for Persons with Disabilities law, which is a law that came into effect following the ADA. And it's actually an interesting law that I think actually sort of improves on the ADA. But that was my whole exposure to disability law was purely from the legal perspective and working with the community as an advisor prior to this. But then in 2017, I woke up in the hospital following surgery that I thought was going to remove a benign tumor. To find that I had lost my vision entirely in one eye and mostly in the other eye. I have 7% field of vision in my right eye. And it was quite a shock. And I really lost my sense of self. I lost my job, and I had to start learning everything all over. And at the same time, I had 2 teenagers that I had to continue to raise, which was something that, I had to really think about how do I manage myself and how do I manage my kids, and not wallow in my own self-pity. So I got myself into therapy and took the nanny who had been dealing with all of the household stuff and asked her to become my house aide. And she started working and taking care of the house and cleaning up after me. The kids were big and didn't really need her anymore. And so now she's my nanny, basically. And it's a wonderful new relationship that we have. It took quite a while. I think I was very, very depressed for about a year or more. And I started taking medication. And about a year or more later, taking all kinds of trainings. I had a woman who came, a social worker who came and trained me on how to use the white cane, and another social worker who came to train me on how to do household activities like cutting and pouring liquids, and how to organize my closet so that I could find things in my closet, and to do simple tasks around the house. And I began to come out of my shell a bit. And a very close friend of mine kept encouraging me to look into getting a guide dog. And I kept pushing it off and pushing it off and pushing it off. And finally she broke through and she told me so much about the Guide Dog Center in Israel. And I finally registered with them. And in October last year, so it's almost a year, I received my first guide dog, and totally changed my life. I am now able to walk again like what I call a normal person in terms of walking pace. I walk again at my usual walking pace. And to just give you all a sense, when I was walking with the white cane, I was searching for the next obstacle. And I found that people they weren't observant of the cane. They would sometimes walk into the cane, or I had especially children and youngsters would jump over the cane, which is very distracting and dangerous for me. But I found walking with the cane very difficult, and I walked very slowly with it. But now with the guide dog, I can walk because she basically makes the decision as to whether we're bearing left or bearing right in order to avoid walking into a garbage can or a bench, and to continue walking. And I find that to be quite a pleasure that I can keep going. And it's really, really very nice. And that opened for me all kinds of other opportunities. All through this time, I have to say that one thing that did keep me sane was Democrats Abroad. I was the chair of Democrats Abroad Israel, and I found that the work that I was doing for Democrats Abroad, while quite rewarding, was also quite taxing. And I wasn't able to accomplish a lot, and I often felt quite frustrated. And so I asked one of the social workers that I was working with if there wasn't the opportunity to be able to get training using the computer. And finally, I unlocked the key, unlocked the door, and managed to get training on using the computer. Ordinarily, there's subsidized training for students, and there's subsidized training for people who are working, but volunteer working is not really considered working. But I managed to get them to do that for me anyway, because I was the head of Democrats Abroad in Israel. And I managed to get the training. I completed 6 months of training, and I am now able to use Windows. I'm able to use Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. And I feel quite accomplished with keyboard commands instead of a mouse. And I even am able to find how to get onto Zoom like I did today. So these are all quite good things. And this has put me back on track to being able to do legal work. And so I accepted the appointment to become Deputy International Counsel to our new International Counsel, Orlando Vidal. And so I'm happily providing legal advice to our global organization, and feeling much more like myself, navigating the world differently, but with my limitations, but continuing on. And I'm really happy to be part of this new caucus in formation. I hope everybody will support us.
Marnie, you're muted.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Heather. Thank you all. That you've done so much today to help all of us really understand what we're talking about. I think the fact that you were willing to share some very private, personal journeys was mind-blowing. That you are very, very generous, and that we are looking forward to kind of coming through. We're all kind of coming through for all of us, really. We're now going to have a few questions, and the first question is actually for everyone. So anybody that wants to jump on in, it would be great. The first question is, it's really kind of obvious after we had this conversation, but why is it necessary to have a disability activist community? And on that, because we saw the beginnings of the activist community when we saw CRIP CAMP. What would you say the impact of their campaign and the entire movement campaign has been and has not been on us as a country, meaning the United States? Anybody want to jump in?
Summer.
So I think, I think CRIP Camp
There you go.
in general should be like required viewing for everyone, because one of the things that it has done and is continuing to do is empower people with disabilities to be part of a movement. But one place where that fails, I think, is that it is doing that in kind of an echo chamber. Like, people with disabilities and people who support people with disabilities are the only people watching CRIP Camp. And I wish that, I sit down with my friends and make them watch it, because it's that important.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's all do that. And everybody that's watching, I hope that you've all, if you haven't already done it, we've got the link available. So it's easy. It's on Netflix, and we'll mention that it was made possible by Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, who started the production company. So anyway, if that's incentive, hopefully you'll take advantage of it. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth to have another question.
Let me know when you can hear me.
Yeah, you're
All
there.
right. Thank you. My question is for Summer. What do you think was the greatest impact or the most important aspect of the American Disability Act when it passed 31 years ago?
So I think that one of the most impactful things that happened was the change to our structures in the US. So one of the ways that they protested for the ADA was people getting out of their wheelchairs and clambering up stairs, you know, at the Capitol building. And the landscape has just completely changed so that people with mobility issues can just, you know, navigate places in the United States far better. It was really brought to my attention in Japan when I lived there and I broke my leg. And I had a hair appointment, and Japan is it's built up. And I had to crawl on my hands and knees up a staircase to get to the appointment. And that's one of the things that I think that the ADA did that's monumental is change access for people with limited mobility.
That's great. And Ken, I think you have a question now. Ken, I think you're muted. Okay.
I don't have a question.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to jump right in then. This one is for Mike. What would you say is the situation today for legislation? For the legislation, the ADA? Do you think it needs changing or updating, or perhaps protection? I think you've been reading a little bit.
I think that would be putting it lightly. Yes. I do a lot of reading. I spend most of my waking hours with Congress.gov open. Some might say that it gets a little ridiculous, but you know, I'm going to be honest. It took 15 years of activism to get the ADA signed and to get it drafted, you know, and we're still 31 years later fighting the fight for full enforcement of those laws, because just getting a law passed is just the first step. And one of the issues that we run into is that in many cases, administrations aren't willing to enforce the laws that are passed. We learned that during the Carter administration, when one of his, I forget the man's name. I'm sure that someone can tell me here, but he wouldn't sign Section 504 of a law that passed during Nixon's presidency. And that one was incredibly important because it was a non-discrimination clause for federal property and for anything basically that got federal grant money. They couldn't discriminate against anyone, and that included the disabled community. And it took years to get the government to enforce that. And then when the ADA was finally signed, it took years to get the government to fully enforce it. And now, you know, all the time you read stories where the media vilifies disability rights lawyers any and every time they try to enforce the ADA. You know, you'll read about, oh, you know, disability rights lawyer goes to small town in Kentucky and sues entire business district for not having wheelchair ramps, or, you know, something like that. And it's just, it's an attempt to paint this as a ridiculous ask, and it's not. It really isn't. It's not that difficult to make things accessible. A ramp doesn't cost that much. And it, you know, one of the questions that was always asked was, how many people is this actually going to serve? Well, you know what? If it serves one person, then it's done its job, and that's all that matters. And I think that a lot of what we really need to change is the cultural and societal perception of disability and, you know, what it means. And, you know, for me, one of the biggest areas of advocacy in that area is the civilian disability system, and how archaic and awful that system really is. My mother is a social worker in rural North Carolina, and you know, there are cases that get denied entirely for civilian disability for the most ridiculous reasons imaginable. Someone who is 100% blind, someone denied their application for civilian disability because they could, quote unquote, work in a factory washing eggs. If that's not the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my entire life, then, you know, maybe I need to go get my hearing checked. Like, it's insane, the kinds of things that that slip through the cracks. And, you know, marginalized communities like disabled individuals are the ones who feel it the most. And, you know, when you look at the way that civilian disability works, disability payments are viewed in such a way that they make it so that people who can't work due to disabilities are essentially second-class citizens, because disability payments typically aren't enough to support a healthy lifestyle anywhere in the United States. Getting married in most cases makes you ineligible for payments. Getting any kind of job makes you ineligible for payments. You know, it's ridiculous. And I think it's high time that the disability system was overhauled from the ground up to look a hell of a lot more like VA disability. You know, it's not there to just barely survive on. It's there to help disabled individuals have some equity, especially financial equity. You know, it's there to make up for wage losses that often naturally come with disability. And, you know, the funny thing is, when I get married, my VA disability payments increase. They don't go away. If I get a job and I start earning a living wage again, my disability payments, they don't go away. You know, I'm treated with respect because of my status as a disabled veteran. So why the hell can't every disabled American get that same respect and that same treatment? You know, and if I have a little bit more time, you know, I have some more things I like to complain about. And that's, you know, I love what Heather said about a guide dog. And it's wonderful. I'm so happy that Heather was able to get access to a guide dog, because it really is life-changing for so many people. Yet, for so many people in the United States, service animals, guide dogs, emotional support animals, it's not accessible at all. You know, many people who need this kind of support can't get it because it's unaffordable. You know, unless you get a grant. But the application for those grants is, you know, it's not fun. I've tried it. And, you know, the contracts that service animal providers make us sign are ridiculous. They say, you do not own this dog. You do not own this animal. We own it. If you die for some unforeseen reason, we retake ownership of this service animal and we will lease it out to another family. But you're responsible for the $25,000 in 3 years that it takes to train the service dog. I was prescribed, if that's the right term, a service animal while I was in the service, and it was almost impossible to find a group that would actually train one. And then they said, oh, it's going to take 3 years. We ended up trying the avenue of training an animal yourself, and it's not realistic. It costs thousands of dollars to get professional trainers, and the time commitment and the expertise necessary is just it's not feasible.
It's a big problem. I think I've tried that too.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. I think actually, I think Lisette has a question now, not to cut you off, but I think Lisette has a question now.
Thank you, Marnie. Thank you, Max. In the CRIP CAMP documentary, everyone contributes to disability activism in different ways. What advice do you have for young people who want to be advocates for disability rights?
Well, was that from one New Yorker to another, and from one New Yorker to non-New Yorkers? Here's what I'll share with you. Disability advocacy comes from the heart. And just like other groups like African Americans, LGBT, for their rights as well, my advice is to find something that is dear to your heart, that affects the disability community. If it's social security, housing, veteran issues like Mike, or employment, speak out about it. For me, I faced discrimination at a post-secondary institution due to my disability. So that is what motivated me to become a disability advocate, as well as seeing one of the world's largest cruise lines doing the same, embracing their customers with autism so they could provide a family sensory-free experience for its guests.
Thank you so much, Max.
Thank you, Max. Denise and Georgia, you've lived in a few different places, and I wonder if your experience has been different in one place versus another place. And I also wonder how your relationship has grown as you dealt with the pluses and the minuses and wherever you were.
Me and her?
Yes, Georgia, that woman sitting right next to you.
So to answer the first part of your question, I would say living abroad was, well, in school, which I had a great time. Because we were all different. There were 79 different nationalities in my school. So we were all different, right? So no one was the same. And as for a negative experience, I had a couple of teachers and peers who would treat me like I was stupid or something. I've had constant underestimation, from young ages. And I think that bothered me a lot. It bothers me now more than it did back then, because I was quieter. I was a different person than I am now. I have really grown into my voice. Yeah, so I think it was somewhat difficult for me, like back then, when people would underestimate me. Like I had a math teacher who would call me sweetie and would kind of call me demeaning names that bothered me. And I shocked her. I got like 96 in math. So like, yeah.
Yeah, I remember Georgia saying, I mean, we lived in, we visited Georgia 3 different times or 4, I don't remember. And, you know, we hardly ever saw, I remember once at like dusk seeing someone wheeled out of a apartment building in Tbilisi in a wheelchair. It was like now it's okay, there are not people around. You did not see people, you know, visually, obviously, people with disabilities.
Well, in Abu Dhabi.
And in Abu Dhabi, even more so. I think I saw in 3 years there, 1 child with Down syndrome. So that it's that sense of hiding, being hidden away. And that is one thing, you know, we're very grateful for living in Canada. But I do remember in that high school, it was in Abu Dhabi, it was she was in an all-girls class and they hadn't really seen someone like Georgia before. And I remember you saying, and it was a younger person's perception, you know, or observation was that if it doesn't bother me, if my disability doesn't bother me, why would it bother anyone else? And that line has actually taken me through a lot. You know, it doesn't work to that same kind of magical way that it did when she was 13, because now she's trying to find a job, you know, and it clearly is an issue for people. So, and it does, and you know, it has the fact that it bothers them now ends up bothering her. So.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Lisette to ask our last question. I can't believe how fast the time has flown by. But Lisette, why don't you decide on a question?
Okay, I'm going to ask Heather. Let's see, let me find it. Okay, I see it now. Opposition to the ADA often comes from some members of the business community. Do you feel businesses have met the real requirements of the ADA and have addressed the real needs of the community?
Oh, no, for sure not. The business community has often looked for ways to skirt the ADA and to find ways to avoid compliance. They've pushed back wherever they can. If they're subject to the law by their size and that they are required to comply, they've managed to find ways to avoid you know, actual compliance. They put up a notice saying that, you know, they're open to all applicants, but they don't actually make real accommodations, and they don't actually keep track of the kinds of applicants that come forward, and they don't keep track of the people that they hire to see that they are hiring people who have disabilities. One of the things that I kind of like about the ADA similar laws in other countries that have followed on, you know, following the ADA, you know, the ADA being the standard that many laws in other countries were modeled on, is that they require some sort of percentage of hirees by companies that are subject to their disability law, so that if you're subject to that law, then you need to show that 15% of your workforce is actually disabled, because 15% of the population is the disability community. But that's not true in the United States. You don't actually have that as an enforcement, and the Justice Department doesn't actually enforce it, nor do the states on the state level. So it's one thing that we really need to push on, is to get better enforcement and to have the business community follow through on these things.
Thank you so much. I know that we have a million more questions, and I know you all have a lot more to say, but I'm afraid we're getting close to our time, and I want to make sure we get to a little bit of call to action here, because I think you've inspired a lot of people probably to a lot of action. So I think we should go for that. And then we have a few little housekeeping things at the very end, but mostly Elizabeth's going to give us some stuff to do.
Really quickly, I just wanted to go ahead and I have another meeting that I have to go to. So I just wanted to, it's okay. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for letting me speak and listening. And you guys have a great day, and thank you again.
Thank you, Summer. Thank you so much. And to your cat or your dog, whatever that was. Yay. Okay, Elizabeth, now it's your turn.
All right, now it's the call for action. First of all, we want to call for steering committee volunteers, and we are also looking for volunteer ASL interpreters. I can, for example, sign the alphabet, but not much more. So please, if you know someone, reach out, have them join Democrats Abroad if they haven't already. The link is democratsabroad.org/disability_signup, just to join as a member or even to volunteer for that ASL position. You can use this link if you're interested in learning more about the caucus as it develops as well. And now for a call to action to protect the ADA, but more specifically protecting voting rights for people like us with disabilities. And so if you haven't used it already, ResistBot, the fastest, the easiest way to contact your representatives, get ready to vote, and be civically engaged. And you can go to https://resist.bot. You can even go to your cell phone and text a message. You can find them on Facebook and Twitter. It is literally the easiest thing to do. We have a short script prepared for you to send today, and it reads: the For the People Act passed in the House in March, but continues to await action in the Senate. We must urge the Senate to support eliminating the filibuster to pass S1, For the People Act of 2021. Passing the For the People Act is our best chance to level the playing field and make our political system work for everyone. Again, to get started, go to facebook.com/resistbot, click on the send message button, message the word resist to ResistBot. You can choose who you'd like to send it to. We recommend typing in Senate and then composing your message or typing the script below. And we have included a sample short written script to Senator Tammy Duckworth, and it is as follows. I'm writing to urge you to eliminate or reform the filibuster and protect the future of our democracy, as well as our right to vote. Our ability to fight back against this voter suppression is restricted by the filibuster, an outdated Senate tool that gives veto power to the Republican senators who represent 41 million fewer people than Senate Democrats. As your constituent, I urge you to protect the future of our democracy, not a procedural relic from the past. Eliminate or reform the filibuster. Please let me know how you intend to address this issue. and then respectfully yours, your own name, voting address, city, and state. We also would love it if you would message us after a screenshot that you did this action. It's wonderful. And after you do so, for example, via text today, I had a call to action last night with our country committee for disability, eliminating poverty among the disabled. And afterwards, I received a message that over 36,000 people had already signed within the last 48 hours. And that was an incredible experience. So ResistBot, it works. For the long written scripts, I'll make this quick. I'm writing to urge you to eliminate or reform the filibuster and protect the future of our democracy and right to vote. The crisis facing our democracy couldn't be more real, and addressing it could not be more urgent. Legislation is being passed all over the country to prevent people from voting. Nothing could be more undemocratic or dangerous to the ideals of our country. The ability to fight back against this voter suppression is restricted by the filibuster, the outdated Senate tool that gives veto power to Republican senators who represent 41 million fewer people than Senate Democrats. Whatever value we may have seen in the filibuster in the past, Senator McConnell is using it and will continue to use it to allow a partisan minority to block overwhelmingly popular legislation to advance his own partisan and ideological interests. As your constituent, I urge you to protect the future of our democracy, not a procedural relic from the past. Eliminate or reform the filibuster. Please let me know how you intend to address this issue. Again, these ResistBot will turn your text into a letter, delivering it straight to the elected officials that you choose. It could be your mayor, it could be your senator, representative, it could be the president. And there are dozens of other keywords for contacting other officials, for voting, for finding vaccines, and much, much more. And then you can find that by going to the ResistBot guide. So that's resist.bot/guide. And we have a quick video for you as an explanation of how to use ResistBot. I think Marnie's going to post that in the chat. It is a YouTube link.
There it is.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'm going to actually, if Lisette, if you could just put that whole darn script, a link to the script perhaps in here. I can't imagine copying and pasting all of this. There you go. Because it's a lot, but you can try while I just say two things. One is thank you so much to all of our panelists, our participants in general, all the global caucuses for helping get audiences and to allow this to happen, to Candace, to the International XCOM, to Karen Frankenstein, to Angela Fobbs, and to everyone else on the Disability Formation Committee. All of you, it takes a village, and it took all of you to have us gather today. And I'm frankly, this is one of my favorite Zooms ever. So we're going to have a couple more reminders. They are join DA, donate to DA, watch CRIP CAMP, join our Disability Caucus-In-Formation, and if you can be an ASL translator, we are going to try and have a group of people available, not just to us, but throughout the organization. So again, we have a lot of links, and hopefully we can get all of that to you. And I really appreciate, this is great. So thank you all very much. I hope everyone has a fantastic, I can't believe it's exactly 4:30. So thank you. We are done for today, but we're going to have a lot more to chat about in the future. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.